now I want to introduce our first guest. And this is an email I received probably a couple of weeks ago now. We received shocking stories about the TSA, the behavior of the TSA. Of course, they're in the news on an almost daily basis, but this one really shocked me because it involved a toddler. And here to talk about it is the father of that child, Kevin Ryan. Welcome to the show, Kevin.
Thank you, Paul. It's a pleasure to be on the show. Unfortunately, I wish that there wasn't a need to be on the show. I wish what happened hadn't happened. But thank you very much for having me.
Now, Kevin, this incident occurred at Newark Liberty Airport. You were there with your wife and baby. You've transferred to another terminal. This was in the Continental Airlines terminal. And you're on your way to Baltimore. You're approaching the TSA security checkpoint. Now, take the story from there. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, well, exactly as you said, we had just arrived from an international flight, and we had transferred over to the Continental Terminal for a connecting flight to Baltimore. It was quite late at night for the airport, about 9:30 p.m. As we approached the TSA checkpoint, we were the only people, but we were immediately accosted, I guess, by the TSA. They began shouting at us to move along faster, to remove our shoes and other personal items at a faster speed. Despite their aggressive behavior, we remained very respectful and proceeded with what their commands were. I had been carrying our son in a portable baby cradle. I had sat him down on the table before the X-ray to remove him from that cradle. At which time I was being constantly yelled at that I was not allowed to do that there. There was no idea as far as how I was to remove him from the cradle without putting him down, but I guess that was my problem. I proceeded to remove him from the cradle and went underneath the X-ray with him. And at that point, my wife had remained behind with a cradle and our personal belongings. Apparently the cradle at that point had been pushed through the X-ray conveyor belt, unbeknownst to me. When it arrived on the other side of the X-ray, I had sent it again to place my son into his portable baby cradle, and was again harassed and told that I wasn't allowed to do that here, and that I had to proceed to leave immediately without fastening my son into his cradle or having time really to collect my personal items. So doing the best I could, I had sat my son in the cradle and began to proceed away from the conveyor belt area as instructed by the TSA. At that point, just after picking up my son and walking maybe 3 to 5 feet away from the conveyor belt, he fell out of the cradle. One reason for that being that he wasn't fastened in. Another reason being that they had apparently broken the cradle as they had pushed it through.
So your wife said she saw them break the cradle.
Had tried to advise me, but was pulled aside by the TSA and told that she could not speak in a loud tone at the TSA area, although apparently they are allowed to, and that she had been singled out for a special security check. My son had fell on the ground and was bleeding and, of course, crying ostensibly. There was blood coming out of his nose. His lip was busted. He was bleeding, and really, it looked quite horrible. We were panicked. I tried to call 911, having just come over from a trip to Europe. My cell phone would not work. I asked repeatedly in a very loud and clear voice to the 2 TSA employees to contact 911, and they acted as if they didn't see me. They just went about their business, sort of looked at me, rolled their eyes. Meanwhile, my baby is shouting and crying and bleeding. So it was quite a horrific scene. And our salvation was the janitor who came rushing over and allowed us to use her cell phone to call 911, which did come and transport our son to a nearby emergency room.
And so basically, there was hardly anybody in the line. This wasn't as if it was a busy morning, and yet still at 9:30 at night, they're there right from the start, shouting at you, bawling at you to get a move on when you've clearly got all this baby equipment, you're tired, you're traveling through the airport. And you said your wife actually saw them break the baby cradle, is that right, when they put it through the scanner?
That's correct, Paul. In fact, there was nobody else in the line. We were the only people there. And she did see what had occurred, and she was not allowed to advise me of that. And just want to mention, as a side point, the treatment that we received by the TSA was quite different than what we received going through to European airports, where the security staff there, which certainly is concerned about security as well, were very polite and made special considerations for the fact that we were traveling with a infant baby.
I mean, it's amazing. I've been to communist China, and the treatment is about 500% better than TSA and Homeland Security when I went to America, got all my fingerprints taken. Don't need to get your fingerprints taken when you go to communist China, so that just shows how unfree America is with all this security theater. So basically, you go through, the baby cradle's broken, you try to put your son in it, he falls to the floor, and you said not just his lip was bust open, but his nose was actually broken. Is that the case?
Well, his nose was not exactly broken, because at his age, as the doctors explained to us, it's not really possible for your nose to be technically broken because the cartilage isn't fully formed. But it was close to a broken nose as possible, and he was bleeding out of his nose. The cartilage was busted. His lip was busted as well, to the extent that even now, many months later, you can still see where his lip was busted at that time. And I just wanted to say, even outside of what actually happened and him falling, which is horrific enough, the biggest crime to me is the fact that the TSA did absolutely nothing. So it's really my feeling that the TSA would have even let my son, God forbid, die there, if that was the case, rather than act. And so, to me, it was something that I never thought that I would ever live to see, especially in the United States of America.
And so, when your son actually fell to the floor and started bleeding and crying, what were the TSA agents doing? Were they just standing around and chatting, or were they trying to work out what to do, or did they just not care?
They were looking at each other. They looked at me several times and rolled their eyes and began talking to themselves again. Basically, they didn't pay any attention to us whatsoever, other than to sort of smirk at us.
And then the police arrived, didn't they? And you tried to file charges. Tell us what happened with that.
That's correct. I did call 911. 911 asked if we needed an ambulance or police. I advised them both. The ambulance came, of course. The primary concern was with my son. While they were doing tests on him, I went with a police officer. The officer asked me if I'd like to file a complaint against the TSA. I advised him that I would like to. He asked me to come with him and to identify who the TSA personnel were, which I did. At that point, he said that I should leave. And he advised me that he was going to view the video footage. I said I'd like to see that as well, and like to be present, because I would like to file charges against those two TSA employees. And he very strongly cautioned me that I was instructed to vacate the immediate area and to find me.
We're going to go to a break now, but we'll come back and finish the story with Kevin Ryan. It's Infowars.com/opt-out. This is the Alex Jones Show. I'm Paul Joseph Watson, filling in for Alex. Stay tuned. We'll be back.
Is it not, my king, time to spring the trap?
No, we must desecrate the soul and the flesh of the Creator's creation.
The chain of life broken forever. A monument
Talking to Kevin Ryan, who is a father who went through TSA security at Newark Liberty Airport. His son was with him and his wife, his baby son, went through the security. The TSA agents actually broke the baby cradle as they put it through the X-ray scanner. He put his son in the cradle. His son fell out, lay there on the floor, bleeding, crying. The TSA agents did absolutely nothing, and then later Kevin was basically kicked out of the airport when he tried to make a fuss out of it. Kevin, in the email you sent me, you talked about this feeling of entering into a post-apocalyptic world when you arrived there in the United States. Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, there's no really other way to put it. It was something that I just could not conceive what was possible. Certainly in the country that I call home. And having been traveling and then returning, it was almost as if, as I said earlier, I had flown back not to the actual United States, but to a type of Twilight Zone USA. So it was very, very hard to believe that this was actually possible. Really, it was experiencing what people are like if they don't have souls, and I really think that that's unfortunately a fair way to describe the way the people at the TSA acted. I can't imagine that they could have that much hostility towards a baby. I didn't mention when we went through the X-ray, when I went through with my son, he had a baby blanket underneath of him, and one of the TSA employees came and yanked the blanket out from underneath of him. Of course, he was crying at that point, and they said, you can't go through with the blanket, and also in a hostile tone. So they just seem to have no respect for citizens, and certainly no respect for baby. I mean, it's a sad statement when even our babies aren't safe. There's many an evil person who still has some level of sympathy for children, but apparently that's not the case with all TSA employees.
I mean, it's amazing, isn't it? They must be being trained to be rude and hostile to people as an intimidation tactic. Because, I mean, there's so many stories now, they come out on an almost daily basis. And just the rudeness, even when I go on Twitter and search for TSA stories, it's just one after another. I went through such and such an airport security 5 minutes ago. I've never experienced ruder airport security. And the fact is, it's losing the United States billions and billions of dollars of tourism money because people are just refusing to visit there now. Have you considered filing a lawsuit? Where are you going to take this from here?
Considered filing a lawsuit mainly as a matter of principle, and I've told a number of attorneys that I've spoke with that in order to make this more appealing for them, we're not seeking, we don't need to be on the financial receiving end of any type of settlements. We just like to get this case out there. We just like to get reform within the TSA. Anything else they can take, we just want to we just want to stop this from happening to other people, and certainly to other babies. And I really believe it was a situation where somebody in a similar situation could have been more seriously injured or even died. So I do feel it's my responsibility to make this known and to do something. That's what I appreciate you having me on the show. The lawyers that I spoke with were quite surprisingly to me, not terribly interested in the case. And they said, listen, this is really a horrific thing that happened to you, but the TSA is a very powerful engine to go up against. And it's not something that our law firm would be interested in pursuing. So they really felt like they didn't have a chance to win the case. And just also would mention that I also contacted the TSA and gave them an opportunity to address the matter internally. And they did send me a letter in reply several months later and said they had reviewed the footage, which the police have seen and the TSA has seen, but I as a citizen am not allowed to see. And said that they saw what I was referring to, but the actions of the TSA were in keeping with their official policy, which I take as a known of what as acceptance of what happened as being part of standard protocol for the TSA.
Well, it's a shocking story, and we'll be sure to have the article up about it on Infowars.com tomorrow. Keep us up to date, Kevin, with any developments, and really appreciate you joining us on the show today. That's Kevin Ryan. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you, Paul, very much for having me on.
Thank you.